So thank you, ladies, for being with us today.
Well, thanks as always for having us. We really look forward, excuse me, to these sessions and learning from you all. And today we have Cheryl leading us through a phenomenal program on analyzing complex images. And without further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you to everybody who has shown up here today after a full teaching day. I don't take that for granted. And I think I say that every time because I don't take that for granted. So what we have planned today are to apply some techniques to hone observation skills of the big complex images. And some of these are probably going to be familiar to you. And in that case, I thank you for riding along with us again. Some of them may be new, in which case it's exciting. And in any case, we're going to follow the same pattern we followed other sessions of asking you to participate as a learner and then stepping back, a super good learner, and we're going to move kind of fast. So I just say that. If you're doing this with your students, you may well slow it down a bit. You may pick up the pace a little bit, but that's part of the conversation is what would this look like in your classroom with your students? So to flex our observation muscles, next slide, please, Kathy. This image may be familiar to some of you. And it may be not familiar. Either way, we're going to work with it. So what I'd like you to do is hands off keyboards. Take a good close look at this, and I am going to time out 30 seconds. And I'm just, trust you that you are simply looking, taking in details, thinking about what you're seeing. And then at the end of that 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to take a minute and record what you're seeing, not as a quiz. It's always fascinating to see who notices what. And this is a rich, busy image. So without further delay, 30 seconds starts now. I'm going to mute myself. Amazing how fast 30 seconds can be. Kathy, if you would go back to the title slide, please. And colleagues, I invite you to use your text chat to record. What did you notice? And be as descriptive as you like. So I'm going to, again, pause my voice and give you about a minute to go ahead and type in, what do you notice? It keeps the chat a little cleaner if you put all of your noticings in and then hit enter. So just kind of do a stream of consciousness, maybe separated by commas or semicolons or dashes or dots, whatever you like, so that we can see all of your answers. Dee has summed it up with people traveling west. I would invite you to, if you remember any details about those people, to add those. Several people have noticed what the figure they're describing as an angel carrying a book. Wagon trains, train, plow, Native American, oxen and plow. This is going fast. I'm not going to be able to read all of them. Modes of transport, covered wagons, train, city and town in the background. Travelers. You're seeing lots of things. I'm going to shift the question just a little bit to what did you notice first? So think about when the picture first came up, what caught your eye first? And as always, I encourage you to respond to each other's comments if you like. And we're a small enough group and we've spent enough time together. If you want to unmute because you've just had enough with text, that's okay. We can do that. And Kathy, if you would advance to the slide that says, what would you notice first, please? Thank you. Looks like that lady in the sky / angel floating figure holding a book is what caught many people's eyes. Wendy says the muted colors. Brandy expanded that it's because the angel is bright and the largest image. And what I like about this question is there's no wrong answer. Everybody can see something different. This particular image, yeah, the central figure, probably most people are going to see that because that central figure is large and central and pretty much dominates this. Different images, you would respond there may be a wider variety of responses with other images. A side note on my own practice, if you hear me struggling to avoid the word answer, it's because I really much prefer response because it feels more open-ended. Answer, we have an expectation that you're looking for the right answer, the one answer. And that's contrary to the value of this work. So thank you for being with me as I struggle with that. I realize answer is really ingrained in me. It's kind of amazing. So let's apply a technique of zooming in and focusing piece by piece on some details. So we're going to start with the lower right quadrant, use those same observation skills, and maybe focus on, in particular, if you see anything that you didn't notice when you were looking at the whole image. And again, use the text or unmute and use your voice. That's fine too. A couple of people noticing the deer, the log cabin, plowing, carriage. And Ashley, I'm just going to pull out that you phrased it, I did not notice, because that's the value, I think, of this zoom in technique that, again, this may be familiar. I certainly didn't invent it, but it is particularly valuable when you have a rich and complicated image. The train. We're going to keep applying this technique and just circle on around the painting. So Kathy, at your convenience, we're going to look at the lower left quadrant. And again, what do you notice? And a particular focus on anything that maybe you didn't catch when you were looking at the full-sized image. Indians looking back at the settlers, a dog, dogs, the bear, the dog bear. I don't know if that's one or two, but I at first glance, that figure that I think is a bear looks like a dog to me, carrying children. Now I have to take a closer look. I have to find the children. A question, is that a soldier? Rebecca, I'm not sure how to interpret your question mark, so not sure if they're children. If you want to unmute and talk about, so what are you looking at that may or may not be children?
Where the Indians are pulling, see the horse? It's like they're pulling something and there's people on like a sack or some kind of bag. See the dog? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just assume children, but it could be like adults.
Yeah,
or maybe not even people.
That's a great question. The good news is this is scanned on the library's website to a pretty high resolution. And it wouldn't give you the answer, but if you zoomed in, you might see some details that would help you draw some conclusions. I love that. I've not really zeroed in on that before. So thank you, Rebecca, for taking me on a new journey. Let's continue on around the image. This is the upper left quadrant. Mostly clouds, but not all clouds. Anything?
There appears to be a wagon train in the distance.
Appears to be a wagon train in the distance. Thank you. Anything more that you see here? As I say, this is mostly sky. Lots of bison. Mountains. Let's go ahead and move on around to the upper right quadrant. What do you notice now? And again, anything that you maybe didn't so much tune into the first time? Water ships. Rope. And are you referring to the coil that she's holding that's going out behind her, Dee? That? She's making fences with it. Yes. Could that coil be anything else other than rope and fences? Any other hypotheses about what might be going on there? Maybe a telegraph, Kara and Kim suggest. Maybe separation, D. And I don't know what the artist intended. I suspect this particular painting has been well critiqued. And there are probably some people who have written about that. I haven't done that research, so I don't know what the intention is. Ashley says maybe a power line, a nod to the Industrial Revolution. So the value to me in this is asking people to revisit their assumptions and test it against what they learned from the primary source, against what they know, and against what they hear from other students of the primary source. And again, I'm sure this has been written about because this primary source is, everybody knows, many people know this primary source. I've used this in a number of workshops and people like, oh, that's blah, 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 and they know a lot about it. So let's move on then and take a look at the bibliographic record. And I apologize if it's too small to see on your screen. I promise, as I have done with previous presentations with you all, before we part ways, I will push out this slideshow so that you have access to all of it. These slides, these items are hot linked in what I'll send you, so you can go back and take, if anything catches your eye, you can take a closer look. And you should have my contact information if you have follow-up questions. And if you don't, Wendy sure does. And I am happy to hear from you, clarifying questions or gosh, this is what my students did that I didn't expect and it was wonderful, or gosh, this is what my students did that I didn't expect and it wasn't really what I wanted. Any of that kind of insights that you care to share, and I know you're busy, is very welcome. It informs the work that we do. So this one of the interesting things to me about this item is it has many titles. You can see if you squint, American Progress, Westward the Course of Destiny, Westward Ho, Manifest Destiny. And I think that's interesting that it's known variously. When I was putting this together, I got curious about the contributor. And as I say, I've used this a number of times, and I never really paid attention to the contributor other than George Crowfoot. Well, I don't know who that is. But since I was never teaching the content, I never really pursued it. Kathy, if you would click once, please. But this time when I was putting it together, I got curious. And you can see the orange circle over to the right. And it has his name, and that's actually hot linked. I know we've said this before, but we've thrown a lot at you. So I'm just going to pause and remind you that all of those links in the right column are pathways to more. Now, if you click on language English, you're going to get a lot more, and that may not be desirable, but things like Frontier and Pioneer Life, if after using American Progress, you want to explore related items, Frontier and Pioneer Life might be really useful for finding more items. But I clicked on George Crowfoot, and Kathy, if you would click once more, here's what comes up. A bunch of brochures. And that's about as far as my, I'm using research with air quotes, which I kind of hate, but there you go. They're useful sometimes. That's about as far as my research went, but it would appear from this that he was writing brochures to try to get people to go west, which gives me some thoughts on the purpose of that painting that has been variously explained as in all kinds of ways, but seeing it in the context of his body of work gave me some new thoughts on it. And I put that out not because I'm teaching the content, because I really don't know probably as much as I've already said, but because there are so many possible paths for further exploration with any item. And even having explored an item many times, as I have done with this image, I found something fresh. Kathy, next click. A reminder, I pulled this out of a primary source set on Westward Expansion, a reminder that the teacher's page, we have built more than 36 themed or topical primary source sets, and those can be a good time saver. Not that you'll find everything you want, because we're not magic workers, but we do build these with an awareness of topics that appear across many curricula, as well as an understanding of what the library's online collections hold. So I just wanted to do a quick commercial for the primary source sets. And again, this is a path toward further exploration of Westward Expansion. So a couple of options there. So we have done a whole and then zero in on parts. I want to flip that and walk you through looking at a new item. Go ahead, Kathy. And my question is, what do you think is happening? And I invite you, if it's comfortable, to respond using the sentence stem, I think because. So what do you think is happening with in the 1/3, you can see 1/3 of a picture. And I know that that's all you can see. And this is not guess what it really is, but what do you see and what does it make you think about? And if anybody is brave and wants to use the voice, that's okay too. Kim, thank you for kicking us off with, I think they're lining up because it's the first day of school. And that's something that might be familiar to students. Catherine is thinking of segregation. And if you would add the because, that would be a useful insight into what you're looking at. Stephanie says, I think they're going to recess because they're lined up outside. Dee says, I think the kids are lining up for school because I see a teacher and students in line. Catherine says, all the students are children of color. Thank you for adding the detail. I think kids are walking into school because I see them with a teacher in a line. Lots of you looking at the line and interpreting it, perhaps based on experiences you have had. And Brittany is putting it in the form of a question, which is just fine. Maybe they're going into school. Mary Jane says she thinks it is school children lined up because of the sign above the door. Leah says lining up for hand washing at a pump. Yeah, we don't know what's to the right there. Let's add a piece. And this is an invitation to change your thinking based on new information. I used to think, but now I think. And Amy, why do you think they're in line to get on a bus? What in the new information might lead you to that idea? Again, my questions are pushing you back to situating your responses in what you see in the image, or perhaps prior experience or prior knowledge. Jenny says, I think they are lined up to go home because there is something being pulled by a horse. So still the lining up, but now you have new information. Amy says, with the new information, I think I'm wrong. That's the thing about new information. And isn't it a great moment when your students can say, I learned something and I've changed my thinking. So thank you for that. And thank you for being brave enough to note it for us. I used to think they were lined up after recess, but now I think they are lining up to get into a horse buggy. I love this picture because it's outside most of our experiences. And I love that when I'm working with teachers, because we're so often the experts and we know so much. And once in a while, it's good to be surprised. Let's take a look at the middle piece. And the same frame, if you'd like. I used to think blank, but now I think blank. I used to think they were going to school, but now I think they are going elsewhere. I now think they are lined up to get into the buggy to go on a trip. Take a look at the vehicle closely. I'm just going to focus your attention. What clues are there on that vehicle about what might be going on? Use those observation skills. They're getting ice cream. Take a close look. Somebody might type what words you can see. I think they're buying flavored ice. Maybe they're getting ice. Now think they are lined up to get ice. Take a really close look at what the man is holding toward the back of the wagon. And here's a place where if you have a smallish screen, I have actually a pretty big screen and it's hard to see. So I'm going to focus your attention. Wendy, that is one huge block of ice. Yeah, I every time I look at this, I think, how much must that weigh? Jessica, I thought about an ice cream truck, in this case, a horse and buggy, but I didn't say it, thought I would be wrong, which you are. But you had some of the concepts. They're having a Q&A about how ice is made or stored. Well, any other hypotheses that you would like to test? Any reflections on how your thinking changed as you gained more information? The students are getting the ice block for the school. Let's go ahead and take a look at the item record, which actually doesn't shed a huge amount of light. I don't know if you've spent enough time on the library's website to notice sometimes the title is just a title, and sometimes the title, I don't usually go into this in workshops because it is such an esoteric point, but maybe you'll find it interesting. When the title has the square brackets, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but at the beginning and end of this title, there's a square bracket. That means that the person who wrote the record also devised the title. So it's a very descriptive title. It may or may not reflect the photographer's intent. It may or may not reflect what the photographer understood about what was going on with this. But it says Kennebec Ice horse-drawn wagon parked in front of Bernie Public School. School children lined up with teacher behind wagon as man shows them a large chunk of ice suspended by tongs. So we don't actually know how they're interacting with the man, how they're interacting with the ice. Are they just learning about ice? Are they getting ready to take it in? Are they gonna, pull off chunks to suck on because it's a hot day? And I don't even know if it's a hot day, right? I don't know when this picture was taken other than perhaps 1899 with a question mark. So there are a lot of questions still on this that I had. And as Kathy and I were putting this presentation together, we took about a 10-minute detour to see what we could learn about the Bernie Public School, which is local to Washington, D.C., and had a good time with that. So lots of little research opportunities. They don't always go anywhere. There's nothing I need to share with you from my 10 minutes just doing random online searches, but pretty good fun. Questions that you have about this or comments on the process before we go to our explicit invitation to reflect on your teaching practice? Any thoughts? Then let's go on to that last slide, Kathy. And it's a multi-part question. So just what strategies do you recall that we used with each item? We took two different approaches with two different items. What do you remember that we did? And again, use the text chat, but also feel free to use your voices. Ask for general observations. Thank you, Dee, for kicking us off. Hold apart, part to whole. Thank you, Brandy, for adding that. Anything else that you remember? Kathy, go ahead and give another click to bring up what I remember or what I was intending. Zoom in, hold parts, parts to hold. I probably should have added the 30-second look to stimulate some observation, and it just didn't make it in my list. These also the sentence stem, I used to think, but now I think inviting and affirming that it's okay to change your mind. That's the point of learning and research and life, I think. Okay to change your mind. And that's actually taken straight from Harvard's Project Zero, Visible Thinking Routines. And when I send you the slides, there's a link to that. Next, one more click, Kathy. So here's where this is my favorite part, where I invite you now to reflect on what we've done and share your ideas about, so how would you decide when to use which approach? How would you structure it for your students, your goals? What would you think about? And again, use the voice, use the text. I'm excited to hear what you're thinking about. And if you wouldn't use one of the approaches, I'm interested in learning that too. This is sort of Cheryl's PD, because I haven't been in a classroom for quite a while. Mary, thank you for kicking us off. You picked the approach based on the responses of the students to help guide them to find and see the information needed. That's never a bad idea, right? To understand your students' needs. Anybody would care to build on that or give some details? And if you've used these approaches, I'm interested in hearing that as well. This is time for you to share with your colleagues. And I regard myself as an eavesdropper at this point. And if you have thoughts that I haven't asked a question that fit, I'd welcome that too. And if your response is, I've had enough day, I'm done, I respect that. I think it would have to depend on the picture and how the information is presented within the picture. Are there large details? Are there small details? Mary Jane, I think that's spot on. You know, the two pictures that we worked with were very, very different. And that was intentional. I would add probably your purpose in the teaching. What are your students, you know, what are they good at and what do they need to be jostled to be a little better at? Exactly, Jenny. If I had just waited a second, you would have come up. You were typing that and I wouldn't have had to say it. But I think that's spot on. If there are any specifics that you think about, Ashley is comparing to a standard in kindergarten, comparing the past to the present and using the zoom in to sections of an image so you can discuss using a notice and wonder to help you can compare how things are different from past to nowadays. Mary, I'm glad I introduced you to something new. It's remarkably effective. I think I probably first ran across this in a group that was working with Universal Design for Learning to support learners of various abilities. And it caught my attention because it really does support learners of many different abilities. I use it with adults because that's my primary audience. And generally people work with it very well and don't say, Cheryl, I'm above this. I'm too sophisticated for this. Leah points out that there are cross-curricular ties. The parts to whole and whole to parts tie well with reading and writing, and it's focus friendly. Thank you for that reflection. This former high school English teacher loves any connections to reading and writing. And I would add from that perspective, anytime your learners are observing and describing, it's going to support their writing skills. And I think somebody was unmuting to speak. So please, Jenny.
It makes me think where I'm teaching first grade, a lot, you have to look at their vocabulary and their reading abilities, and a lot of their books that they have, there's a lot more information found in the illustrations and in the pictures than what the words actually say. And one of our standards is, for them to understand that there's information in both the pictures and the text.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. Thank you for making that connection, Jenny. What more? Wendy, I would 100% agree that giving students permission to change their thinking and to say, I don't always have the right answers. Rebecca, I see your mouth moving. I don't know if you're talking to us because we can't hear you. And you may have somebody in the room because that's real too. I pushed out the file that I've been working with. Use it to the extent that it's useful. Oh, Leah, we knew that. That's life on Zoom. I'm actually a very good speller, but a very poor typist. So anything I put in a text is going to be a mess. One of the reasons I put in the quick public service announcement for the primary source sets is if you're looking for a quick grab and go, those themed sets may be a good starting point. I would also remind you, and I think we've shown you this, but we've shown you a lot of things. There are the free to use sets. Kathy, can you pop out to the website and pull up? I love this month's free to use set. I don't know that it has any curricular attachments, but for just observation and fun, it's pretty amazing. And Jenny's pointing out the soft skill, if you will, of we can all see something different and still all be correct. And that's huge. Drum roll, here it comes. Reminder that the free to use sets are at the bottom of loc.gov. Can you see this? It's dragons. And there are some handsome dragons. And then there are the other sets, cats and birthdays, African-American women change makers. There's quite a broad array of these very visual items. So just a quick, again, public service announcement. And I am perfectly happy. You found early schools in there to use in class. Yes, I'm glad you found something useful, Catherine. Thank you for that. I am perfectly happy to continue this conversation, but that's all I have planned for you. And I'm also want to be respectful of not stretching this out to a full hour. I know Wendy has things to say to you. I'm betting you have lesson plans to look at for tomorrow, student work to record, parent calls to return, and oh, maybe you have family and dinner plans and that. So I'm going to mute myself, and after I say one more time, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your generous sharing of your thoughts and your teaching experiences and the connections. And I look forward to chatting with you again next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. This was wonderful. And I've been doing some separate digging. You've got me thinking about that photo and all that it represents. So guys, I will send you all some information. I've been doing some separate digging as well, and I know you will too, because that's one of those things that once you get started, and this is exactly what we want for our students. Someone posed that question about what is the line? What's she holding? That's the kind of inquiry you want to build with your students. And think of what that did for all of us as adult learners. think of what that will do for your students. So I was kind of like, oh, that's great. I'd never even noticed that. I wonder what she is doing. So thank you for kind of piquing our interest on that. Wonderful session. And I am going to post our session evaluation in the chat. And I love what someone said as well about, you know, a new strategy. We're wanting to walk away with a new strategy. I used to think, but now, I love, Cheryl, your advice on, you know, if we can take one thing and bring it back into our classrooms. I think that is a way that if your students, you know, I know for me personally, I think I always have to be right. That gives you permission to say, I used to think that, but now I'm changing my mind, and it's okay to change my mind. It's okay to have permission that I don't always have to be right. Dr. Evans would agree with that. It's okay that I'm not always right. So thank you all so very much for a great session. And ladies, as always, wonderful, wonderful information from Library of Congress. We appreciate you all very, very much.
Thanks all.
And for the rest of you wonderful, amazing charge leaders, I do want to pick your brain just 1 second. If you had signed up for our session, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording for just a second.